All right. Well, it's wonderful to see our wonderful online Sangha and those of you over there at the physical Village Zendo. Um, I really, I've really missed this, being with you all. It's been a while, a few years actually, since I've given a talk. And there's a few reasons for that. A couple years ago, I moved to Mexico City from New York. And before that, I'd stepped away from my more active involvement with the Village Zendo. I've continued working behind the scenes, managing the website, supporting various online elements, retreat registration, and membership. But it's a step back from how much I was previously involved with the Zendo. Um, I'd stopped sitting with the Sangha consistently, first physically, then virtually. Um, I stopped giving talks. And although I maintained a home practice here and there, it wasn't nearly as consistent as it was before. And in a sense, due to a variety of factors and life circumstances, I fell out of love with Zen. So more and more over time, suddenly practice started to feel very distant from me. And with that distance, also the Dharma started feeling distant. The Dharma, the reality of our lives that these Zen teachings point to, it started to feel very far away, which was a different experience than what it was before when I was sitting regularly, when I felt immersed in practice. And so practice and Dharma no longer felt a part of my life, but rather it's felt like something that used to be a part of my life. The Dharma felt like it was something over there, something that was separate and kind of inaccessible to me. And with that feeling of separateness came the thought that, well, if I just practiced again like I used to, then I'd have it again. I'd have that thing. But still, it's over there, something that I'd have to work at in order to obtain again. So this year, I've been leaning back into my practice. And as I've been practicing more, I've been examining these feelings of separateness, these feelings of separateness from practice, from Dharma, from this Buddha nature that we're told that we have. And, I think a lot of people, I don't want to assume, but, I think a lot of people, either through the course of their practice or when they're starting out, they can also get stuck in this place, this feeling that our lives are separate from Dharma, from practice, from our Buddha nature. And it's an easy place to get caught up in because we get stuck in the messiness of our lives, in our relationships, in work and in politics. It's easy to get caught up in a feeling or a place of stuckness. And there's a friction there in that place, a friction between feeling stuck and what the teachings of Zen tell us. The most basic teachings tell us that Dharma is ever pervasive and it's always here. It's simply reality. It's the truth of the universe. Fire is hot, water is wet. The Dharma is simply this very precious life that we're living right now. And our Buddha nature, it's as simple as our life moment to moment as we're experiencing it. The sound of the birds, our experience of joy, sadness, anger, it's all part of this Buddha nature, always here, never apart from us. So, how can it ever feel far away? Well, easy. And I can't fault anyone, myself included, to experience some doubt about this. We're constantly told by our teachers that we're already little Buddhas, but I don't know if I always believe it. I don't always feel it in my bones. Because how can I be a little Buddha if I'm annoyed with my partner, if I don't feel like I know where I'm going, if I'm struggling to get my ass on the cushion, and if I don't feel this Buddha nature, how can I be achieving practice realization when I sit? And I really love this word, practice realization, all clumped together into one word. It's one of those words that didn't have a direct English translation. So translators took two words and stuck them together, practice realization. In Japanese text, the original word was shusho ito. I think I pronounced that right. And Dogen Zenji used it as a rejection of the linear progression of practice. It's a rejection that the first step is practice, and then we attain realization and enlightenment. Dogen Zenji used practice realization to express that it's all right here and right now. The Dharma, our Buddha nature, realization, as we sit, as we breathe, as we wash the dishes, we are manifesting the way, practicing and realizing simultaneously. Practice realization. But of course, it's easy to get caught up in this linear interpretation of practice that will only really experience enlightenment after we've practiced X amount of hours, only after we've attended so many retreats, after we've received recognition from our teachers, and after we've passed X many koans. But there's also the trap of having practiced for many years and having experienced a little insight, a little realization, maybe a little enlightenment experience, and then practicing to try to get back to that place in the past. So as I've been leaning back into my practice this last year, I couldn't help but find myself comparing myself now to my practice in the past and looking almost longingly at how stable and clear I used to feel. You know, back when I was practicing at a monastic center, when I sat with a village Zendo every day, that was a different realized Kojin, not like he is now. And I kept catching myself thinking, if I practice really hard, then I can get back to that place over there. And I think most of us, maybe all of us, have heard the expression, this is it, just this is it. I think every Sangha goes through a period where everyone goes around saying, just this is it, and then they smack something hard. And it's an effective image, you know, just this is it. Pay attention, just right now. But in contrast, if we sit and we're practicing to achieve something else, to achieve a different experience, to achieve enlightenment, to become a better person, a kinder person, a more patient person, it's like we're practicing with the opposite mantra. Just this is not it. Imagine spending our whole lives sitting zazen and repeatedly telling ourselves that the practice and practice realization isn't this. This is not it. Rather, it's something that'll come later. I feel like there's a certain self-aggression to practicing that way. But what if we practiced every day with the idea that this is exactly and only it? Feeling far away from the Dharma, feeling close to the Dharma, feeling clear, feeling confused. Only this is it. There is no other life that we can be living right now in this moment. no other body or mind or life circumstance that we can be practicing with. And so naturally, there's a koan that I think speaks to this. Hogan asked Administrator Monk Shuzan if there's even a hair's breadth of difference. Heaven and earth are clearly separated. How do you understand this? Shuzan replied, if there's even a hair's breadth of difference, heaven and earth are clearly separated. Hogan said, if so, how could you understand it? And Shuzan answered, I am just this. How about you, Osho? Hogan remarked, if there's even a hair's breadth of difference, heaven and earth are clearly separated. And at that, Shuzan bowed. So the monk, Shuzan, is a student of Hogan's. And Hogan is testing him, asking, if there's even a hair's breadth of difference, heaven and earth are clearly separated. How do you understand this? And he continued pressing Shuzan for his answer. And eventually Shuzan answered, I am just this. So you have to understand that if a Zen teacher ever asks you a question like this, it's always a trap. Because there's the paradox of trying to grasp the Dharma and our Buddha nature. When you try to hold it, it becomes separate. When you try to comprehend it, it just becomes a concept, an intellectual plaything. So if Shuzan had answered with all his philosophical understandings of Zen, he would have lost it. If he tried to box the Dharma or Buddha nature into an intellectual concept, instantly it becomes separate from him. This hair's breadth, distance between heaven and earth suddenly becomes the size of a canyon. Even by attempting to answer, I think he loses it. But when asked about the Dharma, sometimes we have to answer and we have to point to it. And so his answer, I am just this. I think he loses, but I still love that answer. If he was sweeping the floor at the time or working at a computer, Shuzan was just that. I studied briefly with an interfaith Christian and Tibetan Buddhist teacher, and he used to say that the kingdom of heaven is right here on earth, and we only need to shift our perspective a millimeter. So the difference between feeling close to the Dharma and being at one with the Dharma, it can be as wide as a canyon, or it can be so close that all we need to do is shift our perspective a millimeter. I feel like so much of our Zen training is about whittling away all of our ideas about Zen, all of our ideas about realization, of enlightenment, just constantly layer after layer, getting rid of each one. We're getting all the romance and the mystery and all those yummy enlightenment stories from the 3 pillars of Zen, and forgetting our own enlightenment stories. The kingdom of heaven is right here and now. Practice realization is right here and now. And I know that's a really easy thing for me to say, but a lot harder to feel that truth in our bones. So until we know it in our very marrow, do we just believe it with blind faith? Personally, I think it's less about faith and more about trust. First, I think it's trust in our teachers, trust that they're pointing us in the right direction. Then, after we have some practice under our belt, we start to trust in ourselves and trust in our experience and trust in the path on which we walk. Then that trust turns into confidence. a kind of unshakable confidence. One of the teachers that I studied with was asked some question about enlightenment, and I can't remember the question, but it had something to do with practice and attaining enlightenment, and um, how loaded those kinds of questions can get. And the teacher just replied, "Don't worry about it." And I kind of love that. Don't worry about it. Just sit, just practice. And if we trust our teachers, and if we have confidence in our practice, we don't really need to worry about it. So part of my re-entering the fold of my practice has been leaning into my experience as it is, dropping this need to compare, to measure, to quantify, to analyze my life or my practice, dropping any idea that practice should be anything other than what it is for me right now. So at any time, our lives might feel messy, it might feel clear or confused, turbulent or calm. And at times, practice realization can feel as wide as a great chasm. But at the same time, there's just a hair's breadth of difference between heaven and earth. But I'll say it again, that's easier said than felt. But there's another koan that I think is helpful in how we can approach this. And it goes, "How do you walk straight on the mountain road that has 1,000 curves?" And you could also frame this question in a different way. How do you practice in a life that has twists and turns, ups and downs, potholes and assholes? Well, when the path turns right, you turn right. When the path turns left, you turn left. When you feel joy, you're joyful. When you feel anger, you're angry. If confusion comes, you're confused. So I'd fallen out of love with Zen for a little while. And after a lot of internal drama, as I stepped back into my practice, I finally realized that I only had to shift my perspective a millimeter. And it feels like coming home. I feel like so much about the path that we walk is learning to come home over and over and over again. Coming home to Sangha, whatever that might look like for you, coming home to our practice, and coming home to ourselves. And this life that we're living has 1,000 curves, but every step can be a return home. Thank you.